Hello, how's everybody doing today? Hopefully everybody's doing good, been good, applying these things to their lives, and taking plenty of photos to keep the memories alive. So basically I'm just gonna start this video off really fast, and really briefly, well, yeah, obviously it's gonna be a little synopsis of what I'm actually going to talk about in this video. The main point of it is rewards. This is just the main point I actually want to get across because many individuals still don't realistically are aware of the damage it actually does to them when they get centered on the reward side of things. I mean, well, yes, Christ did tell us to lay for ourselves treasures in heaven, that the only means of us actually being able to do so is through our virtue, of practicing the scriptures themselves, and Christ's commandments, right? That's how we store for ourselves treasures in heaven. But just because, there's a lot of, very ignorant Christians that get into the Christianity. They start off as baby Christians and they continue with that same mentality all the way until, they're like 5-year-olds and 10-year-old veterans, and they don't realistically are aware of what Christ actually wants them to do, the general direction that he actually has for them. That everybody needs to not be ignorant of while they're walking here on the face of this earth. Obviously is that you perfect your fruits, right? And the only means that you actually perfect these fruits is through your obedience through Jesus Christ himself. Just because of all the fruits that come with you actually obeying all of Christ's commandments, you're actually able to let go, you're able to see the bigger picture, you're able to overlook, you're able to forgive, you're able to love, you're able to love your enemies, to bless those that curse you. You're able to obviously mainly overlook a lot of the individuals' wrongs that they do to you in your life. And just off of that alone, obviously, you're able to recognize, well, hopefully, I know many people don't realistically equate it, but you're able to recognize how fruitful these actions actually are, and in turn, obviously, what happens because of it, you bear a lot of fruit that the Father is glorified. The more you actually practice that, and obviously it's encouraging, right, that you actually know that your fruit is, the fruit of your labor isn't in vain. And so basically, you know what you actually are doing. These things bear fruit. It teaches you patience, long suffering with yourselves, especially when you're not able to just get it like that for certain situations. Deliverance obviously is the easiest means for you to actually be able to, the self-control aspect of denying yourselves, picking up your cross. Patience as well, obviously, of you actually being able to perfect these fruits and waiting until these things actually become integrated to your character. But I already know, I've been there. Everybody basically gets in this way of thinking that, there's rewards for me, and because there's rewards for me, I'm going to do it strictly for the rewards. But that's a sin in itself, that you're not actually able to recognize and able to see, that how destructive and, how damaging that could actually, it's going to stunt your spiritual growth and the growth of your soul, and you're not realistically going to be able to grow as quickly as you should, and as quickly as you can, more or less. It has to realistically, you have to, and this is something that I was talking to Christ about. And obviously he's not going to accept my input whatsoever, but it was just a valid point that I actually brought up. And I was just like, well, I feel like you shouldn't actually reward any of these Christians for any of their good deeds and their good actions. This is just something that shouldn't even be commended whatsoever. They're barely doing the minimum. They're setting the standards for themselves, and they're only in it for the rewards itself. It realistically has nothing to do with a heart transformation of them genuinely doing these actions out of the treasures of their hearts, not of the goodness of their hearts. And I was like, I just don't feel like that is something that is appropriate for the baby Christian, the 10-year-old veteran Christian. It's not very mature. They lack a lot of maturity. They're so centered on the rewards side of things instead of them actually being focused on their character. And regardless of whether you're actually able to notice in this lifetime or whether you're not, that's also one of the main reasons why it's discouraging for these individuals to not be able to see the results that they want to see, or a real transformation of themselves and of their bodies. Obviously when you get into deliverance, you expect to be completely healed, you expect to remain healed, but some of these things are a process, more or less. And more often than not, especially, these things are an enormous process. It's a lifelong process. That's what the scriptures and the discipleship part of Christianity is implying. It's a lifelong process. You're gonna have to be working towards uh, these character flaws, to be willing to let go of these situations and how people obviously treat you. Too often people just they get into this way of thinking, right? That because I'm older and I have to lash out on the younger individuals. That way, these individuals can know and they could learn respect, and they could do these types of things themselves. But that in itself, the devil can use that 100% for his. It's an opportunity for him. He takes advantage of people that are ignorant of that. It's like, well, yes, the younger generations, they need to be able to recognize and learn how they should respect their elders. You need to be doing it also in a healthy manner and in Christ's way. You going out of your way and just you're not even becoming impatient. You're more or less doing that emotion, and you're acting that emotion out to realistically get inside of that individual's head, for them to actually be able to recognize that, this is a little frustrating, that you don't actually recognize what you need to do at that age yet. And you obviously need to treat individuals that are older than you with respect, and the respect that they deserve. They're getting older, this and that. They're not as limber. They're not as, they're not as young as they used to be, in short. And that's just something that many individuals just, they, the elders, the younger generation, both, they just don't feel, they just, no, they don't actually cope with these situations in a healthy manner. They just continue doing whatever, right? They're just like, well, whatever I'm doing, I've been doing this all of my life. I learned from my elders, and they react to these situations in the same exact manner, and that's where I learned it from. And basically, that's just how individuals just get, right? They get very stubborn, they get very, prideful, I guess, very arrogant, and they just refuse to change, and they get stuck in that way of thinking. And just off of that, they were just trying to teach an individual how to actually be, you can frustrate another person that's older than them, when in reality, that was not a healthy coping mechanism. You were very naive, and you're extremely ignorant. You have not even put that into practice, to recognize that everybody's being tempted, and that's the basis that we all live under. That demons come inside of your life to tempt you to fall into sin. And because of that, you need to be disciplining yourselves that much more, and realistically ensuring that you don't deviate yourselves from the good virtues, just anything good, right? That your parents taught you, or just Christ or life, right? But still, obviously they haven't built that into a habit. That's something that I also have recognized. It just became second nature after I built it into a habit, that I forget that many individuals have not learned to actually be able to discern these types of situations and these scenarios, and the events that happen inside of their life through those eyes and through those lenses. And they just look at it and they're just like, I'm so angry. And then they go off into the public, and they know that they're actually that people are coming inside of their lives specifically to make their lives hard, right? They lose patience, and they're irritable with the person, when in reality, what is happening. The whole basis of this earth is what I just mentioned, right? Everybody's being tempted, everybody's being controlled under that same way of thinking. The secular world, you yourself especially, when you fail to recognize that inside of your life, because you take your eyes off of the intent of why these situations and events happen inside of your life, it's for your overall, it's for you to exalt God, right? For you to glorify God, and to ensure that you choose God every single time, as well as to refine your character, to recognize within yourself that, I've been really negligent towards some areas inside of my life, and I need to refocus and recenter my life back on track, and back under God's will and Christ's commandments, because obviously there's some sort of issues in my life right now that is just stopping me from realistically being able to automatically, just and then like nothing, and quickly to be able to obey Christ's commandments, which is a virtue in itself, but. So yeah, so I was kind of talking to Christ about it, and I was just telling him how I just didn't feel like that was very, I thought it was just a waste. These individuals are never gonna they're never gonna grow out of that way of thinking, and for them to realistically really grow out of that way of thinking is for them to recognize that some of these, good works and good actions are just not going to have any rewards that come with it. And you have to be perfectly fine and content with that, because Christ is King and Christ is God, And it's not even about the rewards whatsoever. It's about the real, genuine, and sincerity that comes out of your actions itself, regardless of whether people actually, reward you or not. It's just like the same old, teaching that Christ Himself gave you, that you should do good works to people that can't pay you back. Like the homeless people or the needy or the orphans and other things like that. While they obviously, they have a little bit more grace from God, that He understands the situations that they go through, and He gives them more graces, and so He hears their prayers. Obviously that's not what the main goal is, that they actually pray for you, and unbeknownst to you, a prayer gets answered that you've been praying for a long time after you helped the homeless person out because they prayed for you. Obviously that is not the main goal. The main goal is the real, genuine, and sincerity that comes out of your character and out of your heart when you actually are doing these good works and actions. You have to realistically really negate everything that you hear, and anything that could possibly come to you when you actually end up, dying, and you end up, going to heaven. And, obviously, what are the rewards that are going to come from these types of actions, from you and actually being willing to submit to Christ's authority and to His person and to His commandments. You're obviously building with precious stones, gold, metals, and other things like that. You're not building with hay, sticks, and and whatever else, right, and stubble and everything else that they actually mentioned. So on your end, obviously, it was just something that I was just mentioning to Christ, something that I honestly didn't like, and it's just because of the main focus and main priority that people obviously emphasize. It's all about the rewards, and it has nothing to deal with their real integrity and the real issues of their hearts. While yes, these things can teach them these things, their whole priorities are all out of whack, and they're not realistically able to. So obviously don't be surprised if you don't end up getting rewarded for any of your good works or any of your good deeds, because that is not at all why you actually became a Christian. You didn't become a Christian for you to actually be rewarded for every one of your good works. You obviously became a Christian because you wanted to be like Christ. How many times do you think He gets rewarded on a regular basis? None, right? The real reward that comes, or that Christ feels is a reward, is obviously you submitting yourselves to His authority and to His person, and obeying all of His commandments, and being able to recognize especially that there's just no alternative to His will and to His commandments and good works. It's themselves, and that's pretty self-explanatory for people to be able to understand. That's the real reward that God obviously gets. That's the real satisfaction, and the only type of satisfaction that He obviously gets. Well, yes, obviously food, whatever God eats, and other things like that. This basic common principles. Everybody's able to recognize those things, but obviously He's like a parent, correct? If He's like a dad, obviously He's just going to be treating you in the same exact manner. He's your dad, you're the child. The best reward that you could give your parents is what? Real, transformative, and definite change, and not this little lazy approach to these works, and just giving it half efforts, and you're not realistically giving it what you actually are capable of and the abilities that you actually have. So I mentioned a lot, right? I mentioned how to actually be able to perfect these fruits, and for you to actually be able to reap these rewards, and how to build with precious stones, metals, and and things like that. You apply wisdom to your life, and then more or less you obviously will recognize that wisdom is to be obeyed. It's the commandments, and it's like God Himself. It came from the mouth of God, and He Himself is telling you to do these good works, or get rebuked in the process of it. And all of it has to do with your mental outlook of these things and perspective. You're looking at these things, you're reading them, but you're only viewing these things through your own, carnal lens. Especially, you're not that spiritual. Especially when you actually begin becoming this Christian that you wanted to be, and you realistically really want to, be able to please Christ in every single manner. I've been there. I know exactly what that's like. To realistically get to that level where everything that you do, you want to obviously please Christ. You want to obey God more. You want to read the scriptures more, or maybe you read the entire Bible, or you want to do this, or I reread certain parts. I read Isaiah again. I read Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the prophets. I read those again. and just to be able to have an understanding and a deeper level of understanding of who God's character actually is and what his person actually is, instead of the same old, it's all by grace and through faith. These things in themselves are just eye openers, right? They're just like key words for you to actually be able to recognize these are just attributes that belong to Christ himself. But it's not realistically the whole story, right? You want to hear the whole story about who God actually is, and you want to know it as deeply and as much as you could possibly understand while you're walking here on the face of this earth. Everybody's been there. I got to the point where obviously I was like, I want to look like the Father, and I want to look like Jesus. I want to sound like Jesus. I want to do this, I don't want to do that. I want to do everything in my power to actually become Jesus himself, Jesus Christ himself. And that's obviously the main point of you actually becoming a Christian, right? Everybody recognizes that, right? That you want to be Christ-like, and Christ himself is absolutely perfect. Every virtue in itself automatically comes from Christ. When these little temptations come inside of his life, for him to just choose to deviate himself from his actual nature and his character, he's just not going to do it, because he's perfect, right? And he's sinless. All of these actions and all these acts themselves were just, expressions of his heart, right? I mean, it's pretty simple for people to understand. They're just, this is the best way for him to actually be able to express his character and what is really inside of his heart. And that's, in short, the type of, the lifestyle that you obviously want to live as well. But people get proud. A lot of people think that certain people can't do these types of actions to them because you're you, and you don't know what I don't know what you've been through, and everybody's heard of before, right? And these types of these are iniquities, these are sins. You don't view them as sins, and that's why they're called iniquities. But these sins are obviously plaguing your mind, that you're not actually able to, realistically really step back and look at the bigger picture of these situations that come inside of your life and who you realistically are to Christ. You are not better than anybody else. If everyone has fallen short from the glory, there is no reason for you to ever think that you deserve this perfect and lavish life when Christ himself didn't even have it when he was perfect, right? We agree on that. That's something that we have common knowledge on. And yet for you to just get mad or angry or irritated by, these types of situations that come inside of your life, as if you're this great king, or you're this super, everybody has to serve you, or everybody has to bend over backwards for you, or else, right? They have to suffer the consequences for it. You obviously don't verbally confess these things, but through your actions of you getting mad, irritated, frustrated, angry, annoyed, you obviously experience more than one emotion than just anger, right? I mean, that's pretty simple for you to actually be able to understand. You're just like, well, yeah, but you just stop categorizing every emotion as anger, and realistically really get to the bottom of your emotions and what you actually are feeling. What are you realistically experiencing? You're feeling annoyed, frustrated, angry. I mean, realistically, that's not even an emotion. Many individuals go on these little fasts and they start getting irritated and frustrated because they're not actually able to eat, when in reality it's because the devil that is inside of your life, that is just lingering around you, he's restless, and he's not able to actually find any sort of flesh or any sort of action like that. And so because of that, he gets irritated. He starts stirring you up inside of your heart. That's just something that I learned when I actually began doing these little fasts, that eating in itself was a work of flesh. And because it was a work of the flesh, it wasn't spirit. It was just something that, the devils would obviously use against me, and to take advantage of certain points inside of my life. I become hangry, when in reality this devil was just extremely restless and wanted me to break the fast. And that's, in short, the real reasons why, right? And somehow there's like some sort of spiritualness to these things themselves, and that's why people experience being hangry, because eating in itself is a work of the flesh. You're eating to obviously please yourself. You're eating to obviously satisfy. Who else would eat if it wasn't as pleasurable as it actually was? Obviously there comes, with eating comes a lot of pleasure, in all honesty, and that's just some of the most satisfying things for people to actually be able to recognize and know. And the devil wants every means to be able to to get you to just continue operating and working in the flesh instead of self-control, instead of denial of yourselves, and just doing little things like that, which are pretty just common principles and easy to understand to that level and to that extent. So hangry is not realistically any emotion. It's just the devil that is inside of your life that you've caused to become uh, extremely restless, I meant to say. And now they're actually, they're trying to get this little action of flesh out of you because they're not getting you to eat, and obviously this is just something that you need to realistically understand and recognize when you actually begin doing these little fasts for God. And the more you actually do them, the easier you're going to be able to know what is actually happening. They're doing everything that they possibly can to ensure that you don't fast, right? And obviously it could be just ensuring that you don't get so accustomed to not eating. That way it's a lot easier for you to actually fast, and that's why you become hangry. Obviously all of these things that happen inside of your life are from a strategic standpoint. They do these things because they're thinking ahead, right? That's just something that you don't actually practice, which is something that you definitely need to start doing right now. But so yeah, this is just something else I want to mention before I forget. uh Mysteries, right? So it's been brought to my attention and to my knowledge that I could loose these mysteries inside of my vessel, inside of my mind, my heart, my soul, my will, and my emotions, whatever, wherever. And automatically, I'll be, just going on with my daily life and doing things like that. And then realistically, it's like all the pieces of the puzzle start fitting, and I'm able to recognize that I'm able to understand and realistically, articulate what I actually am going through and what I actually am experiencing, which is something that many individuals don't really do, right? It's a real mental issue and a real feat for some individuals for them to actually be able to really articulate and really verbalize what they actually are experiencing, type of emotions they feel, and just what they actually are going through. It's pretty sad in all honesty that's the main reason why what they have so many issues and why they bring so many problems to their lives. I mentioned earlier how individuals just always put the same old, they always feel like they're experiencing anger. They think that they're not frustrated, and because of that they feel like that just becomes a part of their overall character, and that they're just this angry person. I've always been like this. I'm this hothead. When in reality, something ended up happening in their life, right? They ended up, some traumatic event happened, or they have siblings that ended up causing them to finally just break. And this is how, in short, they just react with everybody that comes inside of their life. Their sister or their brother obviously got on their last nerve, and obviously that they weren't able to actually flip that switch off, and they just continue just talking to people in the same exact manner as how when the light switch turned on. And that's, in short, pretty sad. And they react and they act in these situations with everyone, and with strangers, and automatically they get attitudes, and they're like, well, you don't know me, and they start doing so many things. So this is part of the reason why people have attitude problems, because that light switch was just turned on and they don't know how to turn it off, right? I was about to say off, excuse me. And yeah, that's the real issue, and that's the real problem with these people. Is they just ended up, that was the last straw for them. They hit the last nerve, and that was it. And but yeah, grace and peace be multiplied to you, and the love of the Lord Jesus Christ and the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ reign in your hearts and be with you all. So grace, right? What is grace? What is deliverance? And what is all of this to begin with? So, okay, the basis of this all, right? The spiritual world, the spiritual realm, it exists. It's called the second heaven. Everyone is being tempted and manipulated and puppeteered through this principle alone. If you actually are aware, you're more likely to not actually fall for these manipulation tactics and techniques, and puppeteering, right? But if you actually are very ignorant of this, you're not going to be as cautious with the flesh as an individual who is in the secular world, right? You already know what the works of the flesh are: cursing, profanity, anger, being frustrated, doing things, lashing out on people, fornication, lust, and pride, and arrogance, and being highly esteemed, and division, unforgiveness, grudges. All these things themselves have to deal with works of the flesh. But when you actually aren't operating under that knowledge, or you don't realistically look at your whole entire life with that foreknowledge, it just brings so much more trouble, because everything that comes inside of your life, you're viewing as these are parts of your own character and parts of your own traits, when in reality that isn't the case whatsoever. Devils are coming inside of your life for that specific purpose, because you completely have dropped your guard. You completely have dropped that strictness and discipline within yourselves. And now whenever these emotions come inside of your life and you get stirred up, for you it's just go, 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 because it's just how you actually are. This is just how you think, and nobody could obviously convince you of anything else, because that's just who you always have been. So this, obviously, the secular world does do a lot of damage for individuals that are part of that secular world, but they're not without excuse. Everybody has come to a knowledge that God is real. The secular world is just a lie. It's a big illusion. It's like a matrix. It's a simulation, right? Where individuals just go into this world, in this reality, where they continue living this life as if God doesn't exist, and everybody operates under that same exact basis. The spiritual realm doesn't exist, and because of that, all of them just automatically just go into their little way of spirituality, whether it's tarot cards, whether it's astrology, crystals, meditation, Catholicism, Muslims, or obviously everybody has one common goal in mind. Is obviously to get in touch with the spiritual side of life and things, and to find that level of peace, more or less. It's just what I obviously see all the time. And to find that certain level of peace within themselves, when they actually are able to really let go. And even in the drug culture, where people just do drugs all the time, for them it obviously is ego death, right? Where they actually end up doing shrooms, taking LSD or whatever, and so many other different things. And for them, the main goal and the main priority is to experience ego death. And that was one of the main issues for me as well, is for me to actually experience that level of of complete and total self and denial of self, self denial. And that's in short it. When in reality, when you just go off into the world and you're just like, well, you recognize that we're all little ants in this little ant farm that is called Earth, and we all love each other, and everybody is just it's all cool, and we're all hippies, and we all do these kinds of things, and everything should be fine, and everything is good, and well, this is who we are, and let's just love each other and hug each other, and let's do more shrooms. And that's realistically the type of mentality that these individuals obviously do. Have. And yeah, man, it's just pretty crazy in itself that everybody always is on this pursuit of spirituality, of denial of self, and a real self-denial. And all of these things themselves are part of the Christian commandments. But nobody wants God, right? Everybody wants to continue doing what they want to do. Everybody wants to continue doing drugs, having sex, and doing all these things, eating, and fasting. I don't believe in God, but I do a little fast because it's good for your body, and your body's clocking at 9 o'clock. This is when you need to take your pills, and obviously they do a lot of things like that, right? Because when you wake up at this time, this is when your mind is, they break these things down on the chemistry level, and this is how they just operate in this life. But obviously this is in one big old simulation. It's just a matrix. People live in this, and they live in this mentality, just holding on to this belief of it being truth. They're holding on to this enormous matrix system, and to them it's just reality, right? To them it's like, well, this is just my life. For me to actually admit that that Christ exists, and I wouldn't feel like that's too honest with myself. And obviously these individuals get puppeteered, right? That was the whole point of it, even bringing it up, right? These individuals are able to be manipulated and puppeteered by the devil's agenda, and they just do everything that they possibly can do to be able to get them to fall out of that ego death, and experience that pride, that arrogance, and that highly esteemed lifestyle. and they do everything they can. That's probably one of the most difficult things for the devils, is to try to get an individual that has already experienced that level of understanding that everybody's equal and everybody's the same, and to finally get them out and to finally be able to really not overlook these situations that come inside of their life, because that's realistically the main issue with these devils, is that they throw all kinds of temptations to these types of individuals' lives, and they just aren't able to get any sort of reaction or any sort of emotion out of this person or these types of people, because they already have come to a knowledge that, you know what, this is just life is going to happen, and I can't realistically do anything, just, you know, live and let go, right? And type of hippie mentalities that these people obviously live, at the same type of mentality that I obviously had when all I did was smoke weed every single day. I was always mellowed out and, you know, just down and not even doing anything, didn't care about anything that has to deal with life, because it was just life, you know. If individuals want to do me shady and do me wrong and do me grimy or whatever the case may be, you know, it's just life. I have to accept it and move on. And these are just philosophies that I obviously, you know, lived by. And even when I actually became a Christian, I'm actually able to still live through those same exact philosophies and ways of thinking, which sadly, you know, many Christians don't actually live. Many of these Christians are not actually able to live those philosophies and ways of thinking out, and it's truly going to take a lot for some of these people to realistically really adopt that as a new way of thinking, because of, you know, they're really putting it to practice. For them, these situations that come inside of their life is just like, man, it's just, when is it going to end for me? I'm really trying to put this to practice, and it just becomes so difficult and so hard. Christ knows, but obviously because you have Christ, you know, maybe this is why I was actually able to really live that philosophy out, because he gave me more graces to be able to. And because you actually have Christ, you could pray to Christ and ask him to live that mellowed out lifestyle, and ask him to live that live and let go type of lifestyle, because that's realistically 100%. You know, those are Christian principles, right? To love your enemies, to, you know, to bless those that curse you. I mean, the whole premise of these teachings themselves is for you to actually be able to overlook these situations that come inside of your life. I mean, what other teachings does it actually gives you? You know, it realistically really displaces the emphasis of the cares of this earth, and realistically really places the emphasis on heaven itself, and doing everything that you possibly can to please Christ and to obey Christ. But instead, you just want to continue, you know, be self-centered, right? You just want to make it all about you, and these situations come inside of your life, and this is the main reasons why you're not actually able to act out any of Christ's commandments, is because of your whole outlook and your own way of thinking. And, you know, I was trying to you know, articulate this in the other video, how, you know, Christians just overly complicate these things over and over again. And all of it has to do with their whole mental issue and their whole outlook. You know, for them, it's just so difficult to be able to understand and to really know and to really understand that there just is no alternative to any of Christ's commandments and any of Christ's teachings. You know, and this is just something that is just extremely sad, that this is why they're actually going. You know, this is a sin, and off that basis alone, you could think of it as a foundation, you know, and this foundation is the reason why your life is such a mess. And because of this foundation, that's what it just builds so much more. It builds this enormous house and this mansion of problems, and you just continue just living this whole lifestyle through this way of thinking that, you know, everybody, you know, it's this subservient lifestyle, and everybody has to bend over backwards for you, but you don't really want to confess that with your words, but yet you still confess it with your actions, and you just do many types of things like that under the same exact foundation. And realistically, I'm trying to destroy that foundation for you to really understand that there just is no alternative to any of Christ's teachings and commandments, which is, you know, is something that, you know, I was, you know, again, what I was talking about with Christ earlier. What was I telling him? The whole emphasis that, you know, Christians just place on the rewards. You know, they realistically have to recognize that some of these actions and some of these acts of obedience to Christ are just not going to come with rewards, and that's the whole intent, and that's the whole reason why they don't come with rewards, is because it has to be a real heart transformation, and it has to be a real, you know, it has to be genuine. You have to genuinely act these out. these acts out from your heart, right? And the easiest means for you to actually be able to teach you this lesson is when you yourself become homeless, and you actually go out there and you're just like, well, obviously now I don't have anything, so this is the real easiest means for Christ to be able to test me, to see if I'm still able to really obey Him. It's it's a test of faith from that point on, because you don't have anything in life. You don't have a car. Your life is not good whatsoever. It's so easy to obey Christ when your life is good. You're blessed just like Job, and so many other different things. But when Christ takes away all of these things themselves, are you actually going to be loyal to Him still? And are you still going to be faithful to Him and His commandments? And some people would just be like, nah, you know what? I'll sell my soul to the devil from that point on, because I'm sick of this lifestyle, and I don't want to live this type of lifestyle anymore, just as long as I get out of it. But that's not why these situations come inside of your life. These situations come to be able to prove the work of the quality of your work. What have you really been building on? Why are you realistically really obeying Christ? And why are you really doing the things that you do? Are you doing this because you genuinely love Christ? Are you doing this because you genuinely love people? Or are you doing this just because of the rewards that come from you actually being obedient to Christ and His teachings, His commandments? Or maybe with marriage, like, why are you realistically, this is just a little bit of, knowledge for you to be able to understand. God will purposely take everything away from your husband to be able to test why you are realistically really married to Him. And sadly, so many couples get divorced because God takes away everything from the man. And I know many men and many divorced men could be able to testify of that what, my wife ended up leaving me as soon as God took away everything. And it's realistically really able for you to be able to understand what you really have inside of your life, what your marriage was realistically built on. And another one also, it's like a little modern proverb that, the real girl that you need to marry is the girl that stays with you while you're struggling, not the girl that is with you when you're successful. Everybody has a common ground on that. It's like, well, yeah, obviously she's not with you because of what you could provide for her, but she's with you because she genuinely loves you out of her own heart. But still, what ends up happening with guys, I was like that too. I ended up cheating, and I ended up doing other stupid things like that, and it's just sad, because you genuinely did love them, but you're just stupid, and you're just an idiot, and you're just like, well, whatever, and it is what it is, and you could overlook this one time, right, baby? And it's like, well, I was cheating too. It's like, oh, okay, perfect. I'm glad you broke up with me, because I wouldn't have let you go, type of stuff. And yeah, man, this is the situations that they actually are. So when you actually begin to be a Christian, Christ is obviously going to test the quality of your work, right? And these are just situations that you need to learn the easy way and not the hard way. Because I already know Christ is going to put these situations and scenarios inside of your life for that specific purpose, for you to really reflect and really understand. So what is the main, virtuous trait that you could practice right then and there, to think ahead, to be prepared to ensure that you don't actually fail these tests, and to really evaluate and reflect on why you actually are obeying Christ, and what is the purpose and the means and the meaning behind your obedience to Christ. Is it realistically because you genuinely love Him and because life has just been good all of your life, or is it because of what, and sadly, many individuals, they just will not be able to bear that type of burden. They will not be able to handle being homeless. They'll not be able to handle going bald. They'll not be able to handle, engaging in spiritual warfare. And for that, they'll end up leaving the whole Christian walk and the whole Christian faith. They'll start making it a thing about Christ. How can you do this to the children? Aren't you in control of everything? The devil isn't uncontrollable. How could you do this? If this is really how you are, you really are going to be this cold-blooded to the children, and you're going to force me to actually engage in spiritual warfare for the children. I don't want to serve a guy like that, And now I have doubts in my faith, and I'm wondering what's the even point of this all. And this is just many of the same old sob stories of wannabe Christians and pretender Christians that ended up departing from the faith, and they ended up just doing what they want to do. and Christianity in itself is just too much pressure for them. So it's very good in itself for you to actually be able to, handle that level of pressure. But it's even better if you're able to cope with that in a healthy manner, because still many individuals are not actually able to cope with Christianity uh, in a healthy manner. In the spiritual side of Christianity, they get into legalistic ways of thinking when involving demons. Did I sin? Is it the sins of the fathers? Is it demons? Or is it superstition? Or what is the main issue? And so because of that, they obviously linger inside of your life, and they get a little too comfortable, right? And they start coming inside of your life, and they're just like, well, yeah, you have to do this. And they try to guilt trip you. That's one of the main tactics that they throw at me is to guilt me into believing and to accepting them to actually stay. But regardless, I don't care about it. I just blow past it. I'm just like, thank you very much. I know what the intent behind these situations in my life are and why they come inside. And obviously it's to refine my character, and it's for my overall benefit. I don't remember always though. So that's good to know, right? For you, that whatever. But, these are just many of the same old situations that people obviously always fall into. They're not realistically able to cope with these types of situations, and it's not as motivating to know that somebody isn't passing these types of tests that you're also failing, right? But obviously it begins to be very motivating when you actually see a person being able to handle the situations that come inside of their life from a good perspective, and and with good works, right, and good actions, which is some of the main reasons why God obviously places these types of tests inside of this individual's this life is for the greater good. It's for everybody to be able to learn from this individual or from that individual, to be able to know how to handle and cope with these situations in a healthy manner. He's able to obviously tell you I mean, it's easy. He could just say, well, look how he's handling the situation, and look how you're handling your situation. What is more approved in my eyes, to handle the situation how he's handling it, or to handle the situation in the same exact manner as how you've been handling it and stuck in the same position that you've been in all your life? I mean, sadly, God shouldn't have to tell you these things, should he? He is God, but he's also your father. But there's just so many different things that God himself doesn't tell me, and he just has to reveal these things to me as well, or he doesn't reveal to me as well. I had to be able to just equate these things and just simplify them, because obviously these things are realistically that simple, and it's just like, oh, he was doing it for that specific purpose, because he knew that's the reaction he was going to get from me, right? And I was going to actually have. And it's like, okay, so this is just what is inside of my heart. I'll get rid of it right now, and I'll just cast these devils out. Thank you very much for being able to tell me that. And obviously to him, it's not even, the fact that you don't actually act any of these actions out, or these acts of iniquities out. It's the fact that you just continue to let them linger and stay inside of your heart until, Christ does it again. And he's just like, well, there it is again. And you still haven't done a single thing about it. I was just like, okay, I'm being very complacent and very self-satisfied. I'm not realistically putting the pep to my step and moving at your pace. Obviously, he's very annoyed and frustrated with people that act like that. So just a heads up, right? Think ahead. Don't get to that point. But more or less, he's always gonna treat you like that, in all honesty, because he's always gonna expect more and want more from you, even when you already are giving him more than any Christian that has ever given him anything in all of Christianity. He's still going to continue pushing you forward and just pushing you to your limits, and all of it is for your eternal character. And to him is nothing. Obviously he's perfect, right? This is the whole progression that you obviously are trying to attain, is to be at that level of Christ. And this is just what Christ himself is just doing to you inside of your life. You may have been doing more works than all the Christians combined in all the history, but he's still going to treat you as if you could always do more, which is pretty good, pretty virtuous. It's just something that you need to recognize and realize that to him, his standard, you have to be exactly like him. And that's it. Everything else, you're falling short, and everything else, you need to be moving and, progressing forward. Obviously, common sense, right? Applying logic to these things. You're not in sin, you're not doing this, but the overall goal and the overall premise of you actually being this Christian is to be exactly like Christ. And that means that you and him are one and the same in every single way, shape, or form, and virtuous characteristics and wisdom, knowledge, patience, and long suffering. He'll teach you that lesson with your parents not being saved, with your family members not being saved, with your secular friends not being saved. And obviously you want these people to be saved, and it hurts you to be able to see, your parents especially not being saved, or your child, or this or that. You see your child having difficulties in their faith, and they're not actually able to really recognize Christ's hand and test in their life, which is pretty hard, for them to actually be able to just be all sad. And obviously that in itself just breaks my heart, Anything that has to do with my son and sadness for him is just horrible. It's because obviously I love him that much, and obviously it just hurts a lot for you to actually realistically really look at your son, know that your son is sad, and you're not actually able to do a single thing about it. And you want to do everything that you possibly can to help them and to let them know that you obviously love them, and that you're not in this alone. But obviously to them, they don't realistically have that level of understanding because they don't have kids, right? And they're just like, well, I don't know. And it's like, I know that you love me and I know this and that, but it's like you don't realistically know how much. And it's like I would do anything for you to ensure that you never feel like that again. And obviously this is just the overall parent side of you when you actually begin being a parent that many individuals don't realistically understand. And it sucks, honestly, because you realistically really love your kids that much, and you want to do everything in your power to help them out. And so, now I'm getting off topic, right? But I'm actually able to understand why, some of these parents just end up getting their kids whatever they want, and they end up being so spoiled. And that what ends up happening, these kids are still, they still feel empty, and they end up, committing suicide. And this in itself is very painful for you to actually live and that same exact lifestyle. You want these kids to live, and you definitely want them to know and understand for certain that you genuinely love them from the bottom of your heart. You want to do anything that you possibly can to make them happy. And obviously that's so heartbreaking in itself, to actually be able to see your kids having, for me, it's one of the hardest things for me to actually be able to see my kid. It's one of the main things that always made me cry at night, is to be able to, to see my kid, and to have them think that they're ugly, or to have them to think that, they're not good enough. And that in itself is just one of the hardest things that I could have ever have imagined to ever experience in my life. To just look at your kid, and it's just like, it's hard, right? And but yeah, these issues in themselves are just actually able to teach you how Christ obviously looks at you as well. If I'm telling you this for sure, for certain, Christ obviously looks at every single person that has these same exact, mental issues and mental blocks. In reality, the devils are coming inside of their life, but this is just what ends up happening because of the ignorance of these types of people that are inside of that lifestyle, in the secular lifestyle. They just continue that thinking that every single one of their thoughts are them, and they don't actually view it from a strategic standpoint. They're still kids. They're still trying to learn and other things like that. They're not realistically able to view why the devil will come inside of their thought process to be able to convince them that they're not good enough or whatever, or to try to get them to think in a way of thinking that's obviously to discourage them and to take away that light inside of their eyes, right? And to take away, the goodness inside of their hearts. And they're able to just turn these individuals as bitter through these types of characteristics and lives and lifestyles, and how they actually end up choosing, a lifestyle and the route that they want to cope with these types of situations, and they cope with it in attitude. They end up, lashing out at other individuals like, you don't know me, and automatically just begins, hostility takes over inside of their spirit, and it's just how they obviously act towards every single person. And they get hostile, extremely hostile, and they just don't know how to realistically, it just begins to be a part of their character, and they just act like that all of their entire life. And you try to help them out, you're like, not everybody is like that, I don't know who mistreated you like that, and they're just like, well, whatever, and you don't know me. And that's just something in itself for it to teach you my actions, it teaches you 100%, how Christ obviously treats you and how Christ obviously sees you. If I'm able to do this on that basis through viewing my son and not realistically caring about any of the things that he goes through, but genuinely caring about his heart and his mind, then obviously that's what Christ obviously feels like, right? That's exactly what it feels like. He feels like, yeah, this is the type of person. I don't think my son is like that anymore, but it was still right. The whole premise of those situations and actions is pretty, pretty severe, pretty crazy. But nevertheless, Christ views every single person on the face of this earth like that, and yeah, I mean, that's just something that you are able, to understand, that you're not alone when you actually are going through these situations. That Christ Himself is always with you, and yeah, for sure. He is everywhere. He is omnipresent, so obviously He's with you right there. Don't listen to the voice of the devil that's trying to convince you that He's far away. How is He far away if He's omnipresent? He's everywhere. He doesn't, show Himself at all times to test your faith and for your benefit. In all honesty, how much more do you benefit from actually being able to acknowledge that He is omnipresent 10 times more than for Him actually showing His face and be like, hey, I'm here, right? Obviously you're just like, yes, I know He's here, I know He loves me, and I know this and I know that, and I won't listen to the voice of the devil. And obviously that's exactly right. So obviously what is the main intent and the goal of that? This is for your eternal character, right? It's to be able to form that into a healthy habit, for you to realistically really look at your lifestyle and know for certain that Christ is everywhere and always present in every situation in your life, whether you're out grocery shopping or you're heartbroken, or a girl broke your heart, or a guy broke your heart, or whatever the case may be, or you broke your own heart, and these are the situations are actually able to teach you, that that's just how Christ obviously is. Everything that comes out of your life is for the specific intent of your eternal character and to benefit you in your eternity and your eternal life. But He always wants you to mature, and He always wants you to grow, because He loves you, and He knows you're gonna be saved, right? And that's the overall main premise and the goal. You realistically really need to mature and really develop that level of maturity in your life early. That way you're actually able to accept these tests and actually be able to pass these tests in your life that you wouldn't have been able to pass either way, right? And without that way of thinking. And yeah. But yeah, so I'm gonna ask the Holy Ghost what else He wants to say. He says, yeah. He says, fight. He's crying. That's sad. Nah, I know. That's also one of the hardest things for me, is to actually see the Holy Ghost crying. So sometimes not really, but sometimes yeah. And I don't know why He told me to say that, but He obviously told me to say that. But He does cry. And He wants me to let you know that He definitely cries with you. He's not this super furious guy who just is angry and mad at the world. Obviously He seems like a person as Christ, and He definitely loves you 10 times more than you think, and 10 times more than Christ. And He's trying to be funny. But yeah, I know it's rough for him. And I know it's rough for Christ to actually be able to see all these people that are like that, whether they're grown adults or whether they're not. And He still, obviously has a soft spot for these people their whole life. And, there's a lot of scriptures that actually point to that. And the scripture in itself is that Christ is near to the brokenhearted. This is so true. There's been so many times where it was true, but I didn't realistically want Him in my life. And then there's been other times where I actually looked back inside of my life. That's what I meant to say. And I'm able to recognize and know that He was actually there. And this is before I actually was saved, right? And yeah, but the devil does his very best to convince you that this is a lie, and does his very best to convince you that you're in this alone, but you're realistically not. That's just the temptation element that comes out of your life, but you have to be able to reject it, and to be able to, accept the scriptures as being truth and 100% truth, and that you're not alone in these situations. I'm sure cancer patients know it very well, terminally ill people know it very well, orphans know it, and they get um, impatient with the circumstances that they're in, which is understandable. That's just what everybody always ends up going through, whether you're an orphan or whether you're not. Everybody always gets tired of waiting, and they obviously always want to get out of this life and out of the same old loop that they've always been inside of their lives. People that actually have that want healing, they want deliverance, they're tired of it. They get impatient, they get flustered, and they continue just wanting to have that freedom in their life, for them to actually be able to really to finally be free. And they want that freedom. They want that. They want a family to adopt them in a good, loving family. And it's just a lot, right? But still, the main point of this, this IGTV is for you to actually be able to really be in there for 100% sincerity and being genuine with your actions. You're not in this for rewards. You're not going up to the orphans to just get rewarded by Christ. How does that look to him? You obviously are in it because you genuinely love these people. You want your love to grow and multiply and abound. You're praying this consistently and constantly, and obviously you're able to recognize his fruits of the prayer actually being answered in your life, as well as your patience growing, multiplying, and abounding. And these are just very valuable lessons for you to actually be able to understand it. These are just virtuous characteristics and traits that you obviously need to be putting into practice and to be asking for Christ, to always continue, producing more fruits on top of the fruits, from the fruits that you already have, right? Just fine, it's normal, these are just, you just realistically, what is the main issue from that? You're overcomplicating these things. All you have to do is realistically ask Christ, and these situations would have been a lot better, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, for your faith to increase, multiply, and abound. And what would you have lost in that time? Nothing. You would have consistently prayed for that for sure. That's just something that Christ himself also gave me. Another virtuous characteristic is to continue just praying and asking for these things, even if I already had them, right? It's just the love aspect of when I actually prayed that as the main pursuit of, when I actually was a baby Christian, and when I actually was obedient to Christ, and when I actually did do all of these things. It was just for my love to increase, multiply, and abound. And yeah, that was essentially it. I really understood that, that if you don't actually end up loving, that Christ is going to cut you off. And because of the love of many, wax is cold in the end, and iniquity is going to abound. So I was able to, discern or recognize that the real issue of this is lovelessness. The real issue of all these problems and genuine problems inside of people's lives is their lack of love. Whether it's their lack of love for Christ, for them not being able to realistically really obey Christ in every single situation, in every single circumstance, or their lack of love of neighbor. These people are not actually able to love their neighbors, and regardless of the influencers, like, oh man, you're really going to forgive this person for the type of stuff that they did to you? And it's like, yeah, man, I don't care about any of that. All I realistically care about is loving this person. And obviously, even that in itself takes a lot of maturity for people, for them to realistically really think for themselves and really recognize and know for certain that you really have to do that for you, and you can't do that for anybody else. You can't do that to let another individual influence you. And it has to be between you and Christ, right? And then that's essentially it. It's just between you two. You obviously are just doing this to please him. You're not doing this to please the person that is the person who's judging and being overly judgmental about your actions, and You know, they're just saying all types of things like, I can't believe you would act like that. Why would you do that? You also have to recognize that the real situation, what is actually happening. In the second heaven, what is happening? They're being tempted. The devils are literally, using, they're puppeteering them. They're what's the word? They're using them as dummies, right? And they're basically just giving them all types of sentences and ideas to actually be able to say, like, you're really going to do that? And this realistically is just the stupid, restless devil that is trying to do the little work. You know, they're so frantic and they're so anxious about these situations of not being able to actually get a person to do and advance the devil's agenda. And obviously that still ties back with what I was actually mentioning in the past video, how I was talking about, it has, you have to realistically really displace um just you not always falling into temptation, but also the fact of how evil and how sick the devil actually is. He obviously, what does he want to do? He obviously wants to hurt humanity as a whole. And what is going to be the consequences for the individuals, his actions, for doing something petty to you? If you are a child of God and if you are a Christian, you already understand that vengeance is God's, and what is going to happen. Obviously, God is going to realistically really be infuriated, really be angry, especially if you are a real saint and you are real, genuine and sincere, and you do everything that Christ himself wants you to do, and more, and and you do these things themselves. Obviously from that point on, that there's nothing that Christ himself is going to deny from you, or Christ is going to tell you no about anything that you actually pray for, when it is regarding his will and his desires of good works and good actions and deliverance and healing. But it's obviously what is the main premise. This individual is going to get hurt by God based off the judge role of his person, and he's not obviously going to do that. He's not going to deviate from that path of the person that he actually is. That's just who he is, right? He's just judge. He's just going to act. He's going to be judged. You could pray for mercy for the other person if they actually end up taking the bait from the devil and falling for the sin and temptation, or you could just deliver the person and cast out the devil, or just tell the devil to actually go when you actually notice this person getting frustrated, visibly angry. And obviously I've done it plenty of times before. If a person was actually getting angry, I just casted out the devil, and automatically they just return to the normal mind. And that's actually able to teach you what is actually happening. This is all the process, and these devils are just stirring these people up. And if they take the bait and then they move on to the next step, and if they move on to the next step, they start giving them more thoughts and more sentences. And then when they actually give them more thoughts and more sentences, this is happening simultaneously, but it's happening too fast for the person, for them to actually be able to process it. They feel the emotion, they completely get blocked of how they actually are experiencing these things. And they're like, yeah, and then they're thinking about it, then they're getting angry. And then as soon as they feel the emotion, because it has to deal with them, they think that it is actually true, right? They don't recognize what is actually happening in the spiritual, and that they're actually being tempted and they're being stirred up. And that's it. And and then you cast out the devil, and they just return back to normal. And it's pretty crazy for you to actually be able to witness that and gain that level of experience, that first-hand experience, for you to actually be able to see and know that this is what was happening. The devil really came inside of your life, was really comfortable even around you, to just begin tempting a person that was in front of you. And they weren't afraid or anything like that. They were just inside of that person's life to be able to make your life worse. And that's pretty crazy in itself. And I'm sure that certain people, if you actually were able to tell them this, they'll open their eyes, and you'll be like, oh yeah, it's like, yeah, when they actually return back to normal, you two are actually able to have normal conversations. It's like, yeah, I noticed that you were actually getting angry, and as soon as that happened, I casted it out. And then you just return back to normal. They'll probably be like, yeah, that I stopped getting angry for some reason, and I just let it go. And I was like, well, yeah, the devil was definitely trying to put you under a trance and trying to get you to realistically really treat me badly. And they were trying to manipulate you 100% and just puppeteer you for the devil's agenda. You were obviously going to get into trouble with God, because I'm a Christian, and judgment, we're not allowed. Even Christians and regular people are not allowed to actually do petty actions or petty things. because of the basis of sin. Obviously what happens to sinners and people who practice sins, you obviously are able to tell them that, right? You're able to simplify it and be able to get them to understand, and maybe you're actually able to save a soul. But I know for certain, the main purpose of Christ, being able to actually preach the gospel and to be able to save them, it's something that he told me a while ago, and it was for you to actually be able to just start casting out devils, for them to actually be able to feel these presences leaving their vessels, their mouths, and for them to actually be realistically really see that it's actually true. You can't play games. Not everything that I'm mentioning is true. The devil's coming inside of your life. There's a spiritual realm coexisting with our world, and you're actually able to realistically really to understand and know for certain that it's actually real and it's actually true. But yeah, obviously I'm still gonna be leaning towards the maturity side of things, because of the overall benefits. I mean, you just get so many benefits from it, in all honesty, when you actually choose to do things out of the being genuine, sincerity, without any fakeness, but you genuinely want the very best for these people. I mean, you get more rewards from that, but you definitely get rebuked in the process of your pursuit of rewards and treasures laid up for yourselves in heaven. When you make it into an idol, you make it into a goal to actually have treasures, you for sure do get rebuked, and you will not be receiving any rewards, little to none, in all honesty. You probably end up getting like 1 or 2 rewards when you could have gotten thousands or 0, right? All because of that way of thinking. You have to realistically really view these things from a mature outlook and really recognize that in the future you're going to be living in that philosophy and that mentality as well, that you're no longer doing these things for the rewards, but obviously for what? Because this is just Christ-like. It's just part of God's character and part of God's qualities. Many Christians know that, but they realistically don't really recognize the general direction that they need to be moving in. It's all about fruits. You need to be bearing more fruits that the Father is glorified, and asking for prunings and all honesty. But yeah. So yeah, turn characters. Keep focusing yourselves on it. Keep being centered on that. You're going to be able to recognize why every single situation that comes inside of your life, what the intent behind those things actually are. It's for your eternal character, especially when you're able to view Christ as a parent. That's going to help you 10 times more for sure. But for sure, it's going to help you a lot more when you actually view Christ as a parent, because you automatically already have that level of knowledge, what your parents actually do or how they treat you, or maybe your parents aren't like that, but you still have a general knowledge of, how parents actually are, what good parents are actually like. They always push you, they're always telling you to benefit yourselves, to have goals and aspirations, and to not be like everyone else, and to rise above the haters and rise above the doubters, and to just do this for you. And obviously that's what Christ is going to be telling you as well. So yeah, I was crying. I know my voice was shaking a lot, but yeah, it's really hard for me, and if it's hard for me like that, I can't even imagine how hard it is for Christ. It's just like, man, it's like he wants to, there's been times where I just mess with him and I just go back to my old, how I used to look like when I was a baby. And I just look at him, I'm just like, yeah, and start talking with my normal voice. And it's like, yeah, it's me. I don't know, it's just funny. I just find it amusing. And And I don't do this for rewards, but I just do it because it's like, oh, you missed out, buddy. And it's funny, it's cute. Yeah. But yeah, he's still mad. So don't forget about that. He's very much infuriated with everyone on Earth. But there is a way out. You need to view Christ as he is instead of just viewing him like he's just this. He's just this super love. He's this enormous teddy bear. In reality, he's the real bear. Ready to rip you to pieces if you don't act right. But don't reject that side of him. Don't reject the loving side of him. Uh, yeah. What else was I gonna talk about? Uh, Christ himself is nothing like a man. I just wanted to mention that just because of the teaching I actually ended up getting. That even though he was a man, that was not even temporary. He's still nothing like, he's not a man whatsoever at all. He's 100% God, just like the Father is, but he's able to understand somewhat what the Father is as well. They're all knowing, but yeah, he's not a man. And he just gives off this, he always does that with me. He gives off this spirit like he's a man, but it's obviously to teach me to actually be able to, view him as God. That's a lie. And it's just like, oh yeah, I'm not a man at all. He's like, I may look like a man and I may look like this, but in reality I'm all God and 0% man. Amen. I don't have nothing else to talk about. I already asked Christ, but he was talking about the overall premise. Do you want to know what Christ actually said? He said, yeah, that sounds good. But he's still going to keep doing it. He's still going to keep rewarding Christians. Well, certain Christians, if they actually are in the pursuit of the rewards. But he's still going to do the other thing as well. Or maybe he's just hiding it from me that he's not going to reward any Christians. That's just what I feel like he was implying. Like he's like, yeah, I'm still going to reward Christians. I was like, okay, whatever. It's not like I was saying it out of bitterness or, being genuinely bitter because you actually have rewards. It's just a lack of maturity, I'm kind of, tired of it. The pursuit of rewards is a sin. But Christ is still going to reward you. Yeah, but do better. Rise above that. What was I talking about? I remembered. I was like, well, yeah, the secular world, that's the whole basis that everybody lives in, and they go off into the simulation, and that's how they act, and they live like this, and they live like that, and then how Christ actually is, and the lies and the temptations that come inside of their lives, and I mean, this is more or less the same things I've been mentioning in the videos, but with a little bit more knowledge, that way you're actually able to better understand what is realistically really happening on the earth, and everybody's literally going through it. The lack of logic on your end and the lack of knowledge on your end, for you to actually be able to, really recognize the priority of actually being genuine and sincere. The lack of simplicity when you actually pray for some of the things that you actually want, and you make this into this enormous, circus act, and had to jump over hoops and do backflips, or else I'm not going to be able to appease Christ. When in reality, all you had to do was just ask for a peanut. And yeah, I mean, these are pretty basic and simple principles, and just many Christians just overcomplicate these things, and I mean, obviously, this is some part of their mentors and part of their pastors and preachers that preach to them. It's all about grace, and Christ already knows, and yet you haven't received any of the things that you prayed for. And I know that you're wondering, but Christ knows. You could just ask. You could just ask for the gift of healing. So yeah, oh, the logic. That's a curse. So I'm breaking these curses up. The lack of viewing these things and the simplicity that comes from it, and them and the things that you actually would need to view. Yeah. Anyway, those are just curses. The devil's got in your head, right? And they try to make this, they hyped it up, right? They made it seem like it was like this super enormous and incredible, impossible feat, and you're gonna have to realistically really do this. And they, excuse me, they whisper these things inside of your ear, and here you are, just believing it, and you're crying to God. Why can't I understand the scriptures more? Why don't I have more of a motivation? You just have to ask for more motivation. You have to ask for more strength. You have to ask for more of this. You have to ask for more of that. You have to ask for more, love for the things of God instead of the secular world, and more love for not the things and the cares of this earth, and more love for people to be able to overlook the situations. And what is it? There was another one. There was something about, people that come inside of our lives. It wasn't patience. Ask for more understanding. It's written in James. With wisdom, if any of you lacks wisdom, ask, and it shall be given. But don't ask with a double heart, or you're not going to get anything. Are you mad? Are you still mad at God? You could have just asked him for these things. You're over here waiting because you know it. Also, there's like this little mind hack. When you actually ask for Christ, you're expecting, and you're always expectant of that prayer being answered. And so you're always looking for it. And so it's like a faith builder. As soon as any little bit of confirmation comes inside of your life, it boosts your faith and it builds your faith, and then you keep looking for more and more confirmation. And it keeps continuing this buildup of faith inside of your life, and for you to actually be able to receive what you actually prayed for. So, what was the main issue? Doubt. What was the main issue? The lack of faith. You had little faith. I used to live like that also. I thought I had all this faith in the world, and then God showed me time and time again that I was just scared, and I was just doubtful, and that was the real reason why. And I'm over here thinking I have all this incredible faith, but that wasn't the case whatsoever. So yeah, I'm going to be losing graces inside of your mind. That way you're actually able to keep this simple. Strategic graces, strategic virtues, strategic blessings. Obviously, I'm implying, good characteristic traits, good qualities, good gifts, strategic gifts. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. He's not a man. Again, many people view him when he's actually, or just me, never mind. Thank you. Love you. Bye.